Hello and welcome into the Coach on the Couch podcast with your hosts, Martin Fleming and Stephen Alexander Simmons. This fortnightly podcast covers various topics relating to subjects from career and work, health, nutrition and well-being to parenting, relationships, and much more. Each episode will deal with a particular area of these. So, if you are interested in learning and hearing some different thoughts, ideas, and even get some tips or helpful suggestions on these areas of life, or perhaps you are into self-development, then we hope you will stay with us and hopefully enjoy a fun, insightful, and what we hope will be an interesting discussion for you.
Hello and welcome to Episode 5 of Coach on the Couch. In this episode, I asked the question, who are you? So we discuss all things around who are we really, and to do with self-identity and roles and hats that we wear for different times, and whether we get caught up in all those roles and whether we should strip those away and look at who are we as a person really. So I hope you enjoy this discussion, and without further ado, we'll get straight into it. So, welcome to yet another episode.
It is Wednesday again.
So I've just to let all the listeners know that usually you ask me a few days in advance what topic we're doing, and so not that we do a load of preparation, do we really? But this time, I told you I wasn't going to tell you, because I've got one question for you.
Just one question?
One question.
There's only one question?
Yeah. Who are you?
Okay. Who am I? Oh, okay, so I wasn't expecting that question. That's a good one. That's a good one, isn't it? Because it's one of those questions that I think we do kind of explore in coaching circles, isn't it? Because there's that question about, are we...
Oh yeah, I should have given you the little condition at the beginning. I should have said what would be when I ask you that, what's the first thing off the top of your head? Your first response.
Who am I? I think that the first response I would give is... I think because it was Father's Day, I think my identity at the moment is very strongly as a father. But I think if you'd asked me that like any normal time, I think I would probably do what I normally do and just bumble along and go, I'm this, and it probably includes something around like my job or I don't know, some made up stuff or something. I don't know, because I don't really have like if I'm honest, I don't really have like a set answer. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So that's what I want the topic. That's what I want us to discuss today. Is all about. And it came from my earlier interview this week with to do with well, it was all around barriers to employment, but it just got me thinking about roles and the hats we wear and the different and identity in ourself. What is our self identity and our true self. So, we all have these roles, these multiple roles in our hats, and it's like, is that really who we are though? If we say like, who are you? Most people define themselves by roles. So that's what I was kind of, so when you mentioned identity, that was kind of exactly where I was kind of heading with that. So,
but I mean, from a psychological point of view, there's different answers, isn't there? Because there's the id, and there's all sorts of things, isn't there? Because who we are at any one moment can change. Are we the same person that we were, say, 10 years ago, 12 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
What is the essential core that makes us us? I
But
can't say
but
that
this
I
is
am.
it, because but it's so many in generals, so often we define ourselves by title or by role.
But where does that come from? Do you think, like,
So
is that a historical thing? Do you think, or
I don't know, and I suppose people just they don't think about it meaning, when you say who are you, they don't, it's like, well, maybe they don't go into this, oh well, they want to know who I am I'm a creative person, I'm a certain type of whatever characteristics and the traits that you have and who you are as a core person or whatever. So that the easiest kind of responses, they usually fall back on a role of some kind, whether you're a mother or I don't know, I'm a software engineer, or I'm a father, or a whatever, brother, sister. So
is it important how? Okay, is it more important how others define us, or is it more important how we define ourselves, or is it important at all even?
I would say that it's more important for us to be able to have a self-identity and to be able to know us, who we truly are as within ourselves. But what commonly happens is people define us and with an identity, and some of those are sometimes not very good situations either. I mean, we define things on so many levels from an identity point of view. So it's not only your roles, it could be religion based. Oh, he's a Muslim, he's a Catholic, he's a Protestant. We've had wars over all of those because you're defined and identified as this particular type of person, and that doesn't necessarily make you a bad or a certain type of whatever's that is, or he's white, he's black. We do it with color even. It's all identity stuff and all. But you in some of those you're actually judged, where I mean, you get that even within roles though, even within jobs. It's like, oh, I don't know, that person's a postman, or and that person's a dog walker, or oh yeah, but that person's a CEO. Those sort of things. It's like you have different visions and thoughts about someone when you just say, oh, or that person's a full-time mother or whatever, or father or whatever. It's like they conjure up different images for us, like when we think. So, and with that can come prejudgments and whatever. So
I mean, I suppose that applies to like how we dress and how we speak as well, doesn't it? I guess
that can happen as well, and it's even happened with music. If you oh god, this makes me sound old now, but I wasn't born in the 60s, however. But then in the 60s you had like the mods and rockers. So it even goes with music. And even that was even similar even in the 80s. So with certain types of music, you were called certain types of a certain type of person, and then you get what's the other type? The other where people are identified as, you get like, if you're into gadgets or whatever, you could be like a geek. And that's like
true.
That, in some circles, that's you're just a geek, and they don't want to hang around with you or whatever, or you're not cool or whatever. So, but yeah, it's just amazing how
And it's no wonder we get lost in a lot of that. I feel that, you know, sometimes people, if you went down the road and asked someone if they really knew who they were, again, they'd come out with all these roles, but if you strip that back, would they really know who they were? Would they have a proper sense of self? And be able to say, yeah, you know, taking those roles away from me, I am X, Y, and Z.
Well, I mean, you see, I mean, I saw on Facebook today, I'm not going to mention names, but there was somebody who, because of a health condition, they were unable to do that job, and they've been doing that job for years and years and years. And so because suddenly they were no longer able to do that job, suddenly they felt as if their identity had been taken from them. And it is interesting, isn't it, that so many of us do feel tied to our identity because of the job that we're doing, the job role that we're doing, and it gives you that sense of. But but on a kind of a positive side though, I think there's that sense of belonging sometimes, and being part of something or something bigger. So, you know, for example, if you're in the forces, you can say, well, I'm in the forces, and there's that sense of your identity being part of that, you know, a part of a bigger family, and a part of something. And I think sometimes it is. I wouldn't use the word it's a good thing, but there is that sense of belonging within that, I think.
Yeah, I think there can be. But again, I mean, if you're even with that belonging, you belong to like say you can belong to a group. But then, you know, there's always other groups, so it's then, you know, well, you're that and you're this, it's, you know, and the other, I suppose the other thing I was thinking about with it was, with stripping away all the roles or whatever, especially like in terms of having a sense of self, I was thinking about, well, okay, like, so mindfulness is all about us and, you know, the person and taking time for you. But if you, you know, if you only know yourself as, and, you know, list down the roles or whatever the hats you wear, it's going to be very difficult to take time out or to really reflect and think about who you are and having time for yourself if you have no sense of self. And like you were saying about the person who for health reasons, but a similar thing I was thinking about was these people who work for years, 20, 30, 40, whatever, all their life at one job, and that's what they've done. And then when they retire, they find it so difficult because they're not that anymore. And it's like it consumed so much of their life and who they were as a person that then they have nothing else. So that's, you know, to me, that's why I think it's so important that, you know, sometimes we step back and try and you know, work out who we are.
Yeah, I think that's true. There's a film I watched actually called, and it was actually called Who Am I, and it was by Jackie Chan, and I don't know if he got an injury or some sort of amnesia, and basically this whole film was about him running around, being Jackie Chan as he does, just going who am I, and just trying to piece like who he was. And I think there's a good film called Memento as well. Where they try and piece together like who they are and what they are, and it'd be interesting, isn't it, that if we were to lose, say, our memories or something, then again, you know, say for example, I mean, there's a lot of people who suffer from dementia, isn't there?
When you were saying that, that's just what was going through my head. So I never thought of that until now, about how it is for those people, and then, as they lose everything and because, you know, I mean, definitely that from that point of view, because I was thinking, well, it's like when you're born. See, other aspects of our identities come from influences and experiences, or, you know, influences and upbringing. but when you're actually born, you're a blank slate.
What are you though?
How do you mean, are you?
Well, because if you believe in like genetic memory and history repeating itself through that genetics, then some would suggest that actually you're already kind of carrying so much about you even before you're even born, maybe.
On a cellular biological level.
It's going to get a bit technical.
If we take it on the not with any specific religious views in mind, but the spiritual level, then you don't have that on a spiritual level, and a spiritual level, then you're going to be a blank slate. So because you strip back all that stuff and you typically on a spiritual level you just are, you exist on an energetic level. So it depends on what level. So it just depends on at what level we speak of. But then this could get quite a lengthy episode.
Exactly. So I'm just an energetic being that exists.
Yeah.
There you go. So I think that's the podcast done. Then, isn't it?
Yeah.
We can complete it now. That's it.
So what are you?
Phew.
You know,
I'm glad we've answered that.
You just are. But you know, I mean, it's who we become is through, well, as one of my favourite books says, is through conditioning. We're very much like when you train a dog. So we're conditioned in life. So that's where, you know, I mean, we don't even choose our own name. Our parents give that to us.
Mm-hmm.
So we're given that. We have no choice in that.
Unless we change it.
You can change. Well, you can change. Well, you can change your first name with no problem. But your surname, obviously, you have to do that by default, which is kind of the whole legal thing. But generally speaking, you're given everything. You're told what's right and wrong. You're brought up like that. So this particular book, you know, it goes into a lot of things like that. So and it just says how we're basically we're a product of you know how we've been conditioned, and how, you know, what we think and how we think, what we believe, or is all through other influences and what we've been told and what we've been taught. So when you look at it that way, that's, you know, obviously where some of our identities come from. So
yeah, definitely.
I don't, you know, at the same time, I'm not saying that having the roles and having the different hats makes us is a bad thing, but I think, well, I mean, like anything, I think it can be a bad thing if you're trying to be somewhat a way or some kind of thing, and it's not fitting with who, you know, some other aspects of you. Then having a certain role can become difficult. You know, that could be in a job, or it could be, you know, I don't know, in any kind of certain type of role or of some kind. But obviously, without roles and without hats, I suppose, you know, I suppose that. Well, I mean, you said about the belonging thing, but then it's I'm just thinking that would we? I mean, despite the whole sense of self and being who we are, but also is it something that we need also for that completeness to make, you know, or to give us some level of purpose even, of some kind. Like, if you're a parent, or whatever, that kind of, your priorities as a parent become different to maybe some other priorities, and sometimes your roles require you to have different outlooks on things, or
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was thinking. I suppose traditionally, identity was a tribal thing, because you were identified by what area you came from, the people you came from. So it was very much, I think, a tribal thing, wasn't it? I think.
you're branded.
Yeah, I didn't want to use that word, but yeah, branded. I think was the appropriate word. So I think that's again where identity kind of came from. Originally as well, and it was very strong within who you are, and even in today's society, I find this quite strange, but there are still people who literally don't move out of their area. They will literally stay in the same area for like years.
Oh yeah. Some people don't even go on holiday.
No, they don't. Exactly.
They won't even. They've never left the county or area that they've grown up in. Yeah,
and I do find that a little bit bizarre in some ways, but I suppose there is comfort in that, isn't there? And again, talking about
familiarity,
identity,
I suppose, like you say, with roles or identity, being identified in a certain role or a certain, I suppose that's familiarity, isn't it? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so, and I think there's something to be said about stepping outside your comfort zone as well, isn't it? Because I mean, I could tell you right here, right now, this is who I am right here, right now. But say, for example, I was to go on I don't know, some sort of spiritual journey to Tibet or something, and I spent 3 months with a Tibetan monk. Am I going to be the same person as I was? I don't think so, because I think there'd have been that journey and that process. And being a kind of a coach, full well, there's this thing called personal growth, personal development. And again, one would hope that through that journey that you would change as a person anyway. You would change your mindset and maybe your heart set. And if you haven't changed, then there's got to be something wrong in the process somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So who you are would change. So, for example, some people who knew you from years back might say, oh, I know Martin. And then some people from here would go, actually, no, you don't, because he's not the same person. You're still Martin, but there's like different versions of you. And I'm laughing because now I'm kind of thinking of these like parallel universes, where there's like many different versions of us that make different decisions and stuff like that. And the more I think about that, the more I find that do you know what, I do find concept quite interesting.
You'd have you'd have obviously you'd have versions of on some level of success or whatever, have done better than you have in their life or whatever, their universe, and then you'll have ones that are really worse off. But the ones that are meant to have done a lot better, and you'd I don't know, I think you'd kind of be sat there going, oh well, what have I done wrong or whatever. And then for someone like myself, who's especially the whole kind of helping mentality and desire to help people and whatever, so as a coach, so if I saw then a version of myself that hadn't had a really good life, then I'd want to be helping them, and so I don't know, I just think it'd be.
I mean, the speaking of kind of time travel to an extent, that there's this, again within our circles, there's this sense. I mean, you'd have heard this phrase kind of, and it does fit in a little bit. There's this sense of fake it before you make it. So in the sense of, if you're into kind of say manifestation and law of attraction stuff, there's this sense of almost imagining being the person that you want to be, imagining walking the walk. And if someone said to me that a few years ago, I'd have laughed in the face. I'd have found that quite funny. But I did this exercise in London. Now, I walked down the street in London. Now, there's lots of food places, and you can imagine how expensive the food was in London. And of course, I didn't have any money at all. I literally got my train fare home, and I was walking past these pubs, and I was thinking, here's this burger for like £12. I'd love to have a burger, but I can't justify paying £12 for a blinking burger. And there's this real identity of poverty upon me as I was walking past. And I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to try this experiment. But imagine I was so rich that actually it doesn't really matter. And so I literally then walked down the same road as this rich guy, and I was like, do you know what, this is amazing. I could have anything on this menu, but actually I don't feel like it. And it felt really empowering, actually. And all I did was just imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very like bizarre feeling. And it comes back to that sense of who are you and your identity. And there's a friend of mine, and he said to me, he said, you know what, I didn't know I was poor until somebody actually told me I was poor. You know, I was living. Right. He said I was living in a shed at the time, and you know I didn't have much belongings and stuff. But it was only until somebody pointed out that I was poor that I realised I was poor. I was like, isn't that remarkable? And again, that sense of identity about what is poor, because you compare it to somebody who has got maybe a lot less, but then they might consider themselves rich because they've got joy or something. And do you know what I mean? So it kind of brings into so many other questions. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I mean, because it's also like when you were saying about growth, and if you don't grow or whatever, if you're still the same, but then some people, that's what they just stay the same. They want that, and they're happy with being the same. So it's like, well, if they're happy, and you know, if they know no different, and they're not interested in knowing, you know, or being any different or doing any more, then is that a wrong thing? But I mean, you know, obviously that's a slightly different issue to the whole roles thing. But it's, yeah, I mean, you know, in terms of identity, I mean, if they're happy with that identity, then, you know, and I suppose it's about perception, isn't it? You know, so like you say, that they didn't think they were poor until someone with a different perception to them said, oh yeah, you're poor. And then I suppose that person must have looked at that and gone, oh, well, maybe I am then, or whatever. But up until that point, then, you know, if they didn't know any different and they were happy enough with the way their life was, then so what role are you going to be after the podcast then, Steve?
Well, I mean, kind of it ties into something I was thinking about this morning, actually. I mean, I got up at something like 5:30 in the morning, and I've been getting up at 5:30, you know, last couple of mornings, and I just had this feeling of, again, you talk about who am I, and there's a sense of who am I, what's my purpose, or what am I doing in life? Mm-hmm. You know, should I be doing more? And I was kind of going through all these kind of questions, and I did make a video about it, actually. Mm-hmm. In the sense of it was all about me, and then I started thinking about, well, what about other people and the people who are in my life right now? So I've got a lot of people who are struggling, you know, financially. There's people who are struggling mentally. They've got people with family problems, people with relationship problems, and then I was thinking about the difference that I make in those people's lives. You know, how am I interacting with them? How am I supporting them? And then suddenly this sense of identity kind of came from that, as in this sense of, well, I'm somebody who makes a difference. I'm somebody who makes somebody smile. I'm somebody who cheers somebody up. And so within that moment of, you know, who am I don't feel like I've got a purpose, suddenly it was almost like my purpose was revealed to me. Mm-hmm. And this morning I was helping somebody with, they'd been rejected from jobs and stuff like that, so I was doing a bit of job coaching. There's somebody else whose daughter had been gang raped and stuff. And so, you know, who am I is kind of changes, do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because somebody might need somebody who's entertaining 1 minute, but somebody else might need somebody who's kind, caring, compassionate, another minute. So I think it's very varied, but this afternoon I think I will be somebody who just walks on the beach, I think. But I don't know, my mind is always working to some degree, so I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I don't think we've actually kind of answered the question per se, because, coming back to when we asked it originally, I don't think there is like a set answer, is there?
There isn't. I like, my point, I suppose, was, as I said, like, and I think it's a good exercise for anyone to do, in terms of, thinking about all the different roles that we play, to try and take those away and then say, okay, so who am I as a person? Because a lot of us, as I say, it's defined by that, and a lot of people around us will define us by certain roles or certain statuses or whatever. So I think it's a good exercise to sit and say, well, like you were saying there about, about the certain aspects that you said when you were thinking about the things this morning. Some of those were not typical kind of roles as such. They were more characteristics, and by doing so, that obviously that gave you your sense of purpose type thing or whatever. And I just think that if we look at the characteristics and we can say, yeah, I'm a, I don't know, I'm creative, or I'm joyful, I'm helpful, I'm so that you see yourself as a separate, I suppose, like a being or whatever, rather than this particular role. And I think that's quite a good exercise to do, because that can then, especially with self-confidence, I think it can help with a lot of kind of, developing self-confidence if you're lacking in some of that. Because once you get to understand yourself and some of those characteristics,
I suppose I really want to kind of like leave, I suppose, with either a question or something to think about, in the sense of, if somebody came to us as a coach, for example, and said, look, I want to discover who I am and what my identity is. Who am I? Because I think it is a fundamental question that a lot of people ask at some stage in their life. And usually when they hit rock bottom, or when things go pear-shaped, when they're, what I call their anchors are kind of rocked, when things are rocked, suddenly they start asking these deeper fundamental questions.
But I also think that question gets asked if you have too many roles. Sometimes you get to a point where you don't know who you are anymore.
Yeah, definitely, and you see it a lot. I mean, I speak to a lot of women. That sounds bad, but one of the feedback I get is, for them, they lose their identity because it's too busy being a wife, being a partner, being a mother.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I just want to be me, but they don't know who the me is, because it's been so entwined within those roles that you spoke of. And so what I do is I help them to explore, well, what is the you that you've lost? They might say things like, well, I've lost the ability to have a laugh. I don't do the things that I used to do.
I was going to say, sometimes it's like, well, when did you last feel?
Yeah, exactly.
And they might go, oh, when I was 18 or whatever. And
Yeah,
it's like, okay, so what happened then that has changed that? That's how that would be kind of some of the kind of angles I take. But
so I think, if somebody asked, I think certainly that question, then I think those are probably some of the things that we would explore. So yeah, it was an interesting topic.
So we will be back in a couple of weeks then. Bye for now.
thank you again for joining us for today's podcast. In this episode, we discussed things around who are we and self-identity, and looked at various different types of identity, whether they are a good or a bad thing, and the different roles that we play in terms of our identities, and the importance at times to maybe strip all those roles and things that we play in life away and consider who are we for ourselves and just as a person, and whether it's important not to be defined by our roles and duties. So I hope you enjoyed the episode, and we will be back shortly with another interesting discussion. So we look forward to being with you again soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the fortnightly Coach on the Couch podcast with your hosts, Martin Fleming and Stephen Alexander Simmons. You can find this podcast on the following platforms: Spotify, Anchor, and Google Podcasts, and more platforms to follow. You can leave comments and feedback directly on the Anchor platform, or you can contact us directly by emailing us at coachonthecouch22@gmail.com. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to being with you soon.